I stand outside the funeral home watching through the window as my father reads my obituary. 3 years ago they disowned me, took everything, and now they've declared me dead for financial gain. I observe my grieving family while clutching documents that will expose their fraud and reclaim what's rightfully mine. As my father concludes the eulogy with false tears, I take a deep breath and push open the doors. The gasps echo through the room as I walk toward my open casket, smiling as I say the words I've rehearsed for years. I'm Dania Jackson, the eldest daughter of one of the wealthiest families in our small Connecticut town. Our family name has been on buildings, businesses, and charity donor lists for 3 generations. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the planner, the one who followed rules and exceeded expectations. My grandmother Eleanor was my hero. She started Jackson Real Estate Development from nothing in the 1980s, turning a small property management company into the largest developer in 3 counties. She was tough but fair, brilliant with numbers, and had an uncanny ability to predict which neighborhoods would boom next. When I graduated with my business degree, she was the one who insisted I join the company immediately, rather than pursuing offers from New York firms. "This legacy is for you, Dania," she told me on my first day. "Your father's good at the social aspects of the business, but you have my head for numbers and strategy." For 8 years, I learned everything about the business from the ground up. While my father Frank enjoyed the client lunches and ribbon cuttings I worked with, contractors studied market trends and managed our growing portfolio. Grandmother made sure I understood every aspect of the business, from negotiating with city planners to reviewing financial statements. By the time I turned 30, I was effectively running daily operations while my father took the public credit. My relationship with my sister Tiffany was always complicated. 2 years younger than me, she was the family favorite, despite rarely holding a job for more than 6 months. While I worked 60-hour weeks, Tiffany received constant financial bailouts for failed ventures, a boutique, a short-lived event, planning business, even a juice bar that closed after 3 months. Yet my father always found more money for her next project, while scrutinizing every decision I made at the company. The dynamics shifted even further when my father remarried after my mother's death. My stepmother, Heather, was only 15 years older than me and seemed determined to assert her position in the family hierarchy. Within months of their marriage, I noticed my input being increasingly ignored at family dinners that had transformed into unofficial business meetings. "We're thinking the Henderson property should be condos instead of the office complex you proposed," my father would announce, despite my months of research showing the area needed commercial development. "Tiffany has some excellent design ideas for the new properties," Heather would add, though my sister had no experience in architecture or construction. Gradually, I was being sidelined in my own family and the business I'd helped build. Still, I persevered, believing my grandmother's assurances that patience would be rewarded. When she became ill with cancer, she updated her will, naming me as the primary beneficiary and successor to lead the business. "Your father means well," she told me weekly from her hospital bed, "but he doesn't have your judgment. Promise me you'll protect what I've built." I promised, never imagining how quickly that promise would be tested. 2 weeks before my grandmother passed away, I discovered concerning discrepancies in company accounts. Large sums had been transferred to shell companies I didn't recognize. When I traced the paperwork, all authorizations led back to my father's signature. The night after the funeral, still raw with grief, I confronted him in his home office. "Dad, there's almost $2 million missing from the operating accounts. What's going on with these transfers to Mesa Holdings and Bluestone Investments?" His face changed in a way I'd never seen before. The warm, charismatic expression he showed the world hardened into something cold and calculating. "You should be careful about making accusations, Dania. Especially now. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm trying to understand where company money is going. Grandmother would want me to." "Your grandmother is gone," he snapped. "And it appears her trust in you was misplaced." Before I could respond, he opened a folder on his desk and pushed it toward me. Inside were printouts of wire transfers, all seemingly authorized by me, moving funds from company accounts to a personal account I'd never seen. The documents looked legitimate, complete with my forged signature. "What is this?" I whispered, my hands shaking. "Evidence," my father said coldly. Of your betrayal. You're no longer welcome in this family or this business. The following day, I was summoned to an emergency family meeting at our main office. I arrived expecting a chance to defend myself, to expose the forgeries and clear my name. Instead, I walked into an ambush. The conference room held not just my father, stepmother, and sister, but also our company lawyers, the heads of every department, and even 2 police officers standing quietly by the wall. My father stood at the head of the table, his expression grave, as if performing in some terrible play. Dania has betrayed this family and this company, he announced without preamble. We have evidence she's been embezzling funds for months, perhaps years. The room filled with murmurs as I stood frozen in shock. This couldn't be happening. The company lawyer slid documents across the table, more forged transfer authorizations, emails I'd never written discussing offshore accounts. This is absurd, I finally managed to say. I've never seen these accounts. Someone is setting me up. My father continued as if I hadn't spoken. Given the circumstances and the pending investigation, Dania is terminated from all positions effective immediately. Furthermore, he paused, looking directly at me with cold eyes. You're no longer our daughter. You have brought shame to the Jackson name, and you are no longer welcome in this family. Tiffany gasped beside him but remained silent. Heather placed a comforting hand on my father's arm. Her expression, a mask of appropriate concern hiding what I now recognized as triumph. You can't be serious, I said, my voice barely audible. Dad, please. Security will escort you from the premises. Your personal belongings will be sent to you after they've been examined. Any attempt to access company systems or property will result in immediate legal action. 2 security guards materialized beside me. As they guided me toward the door, I looked back at my sister, hoping for some sign of support. Her eyes were down, fixed on the table. My father stared straight ahead as if I'd already disappeared. Outside the building that bore my family name, reality began to sink in. My company phone was already disabled. When I reached my apartment, my keycard wouldn't work in the building's entrance, the luxury complex owned by Jackson Real Estate. I'm sorry, Miss Jackson, the doorman said, genuinely apologetic. Management called. You're no longer authorized for this building. They said you have 1 hour to collect essential items under supervision. I was allowed 30 minutes in my own home, watched by the building manager, as I frantically packed a suitcase with clothes and toiletries. My computer was confiscated. Company property, my personal photos, books, even family heirlooms given by my grandmother remained behind as I was escorted out. At the bank, my accounts were frozen pending investigation. My credit cards were declined when I tried to check into a hotel. By nightfall, I had nowhere to go. Just $200 in cash from my wallet, a suitcase of clothes, and my car, which I soon learned had a tracking device the company could monitor. I abandoned the car in a shopping center parking lot and took a bus to a motel on the edge of town, the kind of place that accepted cash and didn't ask questions. For 3 days, I barely left the room, alternating between stunned disbelief and crushing panic attacks. How had my life imploded so completely in less than 48 hours? When I finally gathered the courage to call trusted colleagues and friends, I discovered the damage was even more extensive than I'd imagined. My father had spread the embezzlement story throughout our business circles and the small community where I'd spent my entire life. I'm sorry, Dania said, Marcus, a contractor I'd worked with for years. But the evidence looks bad, really bad. I can't risk my business by associating with you right now. Former friends didn't return calls. Business associates blocked my number. Even my college roommate, after an awkward conversation, made excuses about why she couldn't let me stay with her just until I figure things out. Desperation drove me to apply for jobs. Any jobs. But even positions. I was wildly overqualified, for somehow fell through after initial interest. Someone was making calls, ensuring doors remained closed. After a week in the motel with my cash dwindling and no prospects, I contemplated giving up. Maybe leaving town entirely, starting over where no one knew the Jackson name. As I sat on the edge of the sagging bed, considering how far I could get with my remaining $78, there was a knock at the door. It was Linda, the motel manager, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. "You've been here a week," she said. "And you're about out of money, aren't you?" I nodded, too exhausted for pride. "I need help with cleaning rooms. Previous girl quit yesterday. It's minimum wage plus tips from the rooms, which ain't much but includes the room you're in now." It wasn't charity exactly, but we both knew she was throwing me a lifeline. I accepted on the spot. For 2 months, I cleaned toilets, changed sheets, and scrubbed floors in the same town where I'd once approved multi-million-dollar development projects. I worked double shifts, saved every dollar, and slowly began rebuilding some semblance of a life. Linda didn't pry, but occasionally left day-old pastries from her sister's bakery outside my door, with notes saying simply, "Everyone deserves a second chance." When I'd saved enough for a security deposit, I attempted to rent a small apartment closer to the motel. That's when I discovered the final blow my family had delivered. My identity had essentially been erased. The rental application was denied due to credit issues, but when I requested my credit report, the response was even more alarming. "We have no record matching this social security number and name combination," the customer service representative said. "It's as if you don't exist in our system." Somehow my father had not only taken my family, my home, and my career, he was systematically erasing my very existence. With Linda's help, I relocated to Hartford, 20 miles away, but far enough to escape the immediate shadow of the Jackson name. She had a niece who needed a roommate. Good girl, works at a law firm, keeps to herself mostly. Jordan turned out to be a 26-year-old paralegal with a tiny apartment, 3 cats, and a personality that matched her fiery red hair. She took one look at my situation and shrugged. "Everybody's running from something. Rent's due on the first, utilities split down the middle, and don't eat my ice cream." The simplicity of the arrangement was exactly what I needed. I found a job waitressing at a diner, where the owner paid in cash and didn't ask too many questions. I worked morning shifts there, picked up evening shifts at a local bar, and in between took online courses in bookkeeping and accounting to build on skills I already had, but needed certification for under my own name. For the first time in my life, I was completely on my own without the Jackson name, opening doors, or setting expectations. It was terrifying and oddly liberating. No one in Hartford knew or cared about my former status. I was just another struggling young woman trying to make ends meet in an expensive state. "You're not half bad at this," Jordan commented one evening, finding me at the kitchen table surrounded by her firm's financial statements. She'd mentioned their accountant quit suddenly, and her boss was stressed about getting the quarterly filings done. "Force of habit," I replied, not elaborating on how I'd once managed budgets hundreds of times larger. "Your firm's spending too much on office supplies and not claiming all their legitimate deductions." Jordan studied me for a moment. "You know Taylor's looking for someone to help straighten out our books. Temporary, part-time. Pays better than serving pancakes." Taylor Grant turned out to be a 40-something attorney who ran a small but growing practice, focusing on financial disputes and fraud cases. She looked perpetually harried, with reading glasses perched on top of her head and coffee cups scattered across her cluttered office. "Jordan says you have a head for numbers," she said, skipping pleasantries during our impromptu interview. "I need someone who can make sense of this mess before the IRS decides we're interesting." She gestured to piles of receipts and statements covering her desk. I organized her firm's finances in 3 days, created a streamlined system for future bookkeeping, and identified several $1,000s in tax deductions she'd been missing. When I presented the completed work, Taylor stared at me for a long moment. "You're not just good with numbers," she finally said. "You're way overqualified for this job. What's your story, Danya?" Something about her direct manner made me want to tell the truth, but years of caution held me back. I had a different life before. "It didn't work out." Taylor nodded, not pushing further. "Well, I need someone with your skills on a regular basis. 20 hours a week, proper payroll. No questions about your past as long as you're straight with me about the present." The job at Taylor's firm became my anchor. For the first time since my father's betrayal, I had work that engaged my mind and used my abilities. Taylor became not just an employer, but a mentor, occasionally inviting me to sit in on client consultations to take notes. I absorbed everything about financial fraud cases, estate disputes, and identity theft claims, subjects painfully relevant to my own situation. As months passed, I cautiously began investigating my family's business from a distance. Public records revealed interesting changes at Jackson Real Estate Development. Properties were being sold off at surprising rates. New LLCs with vague names appeared connected to company projects. Nothing obviously illegal, but the pattern suggested cash flow problems. Just curiosity, I told myself, though deep down I knew it was more. I wasn't ready to let go of my grandmother's legacy, or the injustice of what had been done to me. My careful research soon revealed my father had made a series of increasingly risky investments, over-leveraging company assets in ways my grandmother would never have approved. The conservative, steady growth strategy that built our success had been abandoned for quick returns and flashy developments. Jordan and I had settled into a comfortable friendship by this point. She knew I had secrets but respected my privacy. One evening she came home looking uncomfortable, clutching a legal file to her chest. "Something weird came across my desk today," she said carefully. "A probate case," I thought. The name looked familiar. She handed me the file. Inside was a death certificate. My death certificate. According to the document, Dania Jackson had died 3 months earlier in a hiking accident in Peru. "Is this you?" Jordan asked quietly. "Are you in some kind of trouble? Because if you're in witness protection or something, I don't want to know, but also I don't want to get arrested for harboring a—" "I'm not a fugitive," I interrupted. "And I'm very much alive." My hands trembled as I examined the document. "My family is trying to have me declared legally dead." "And?" Jordan's eyes widened. "That's extreme family drama. You have no idea." The implications were sinking in. There was only one reason they would need me legally dead: my grandmother's trust. Despite their efforts to discredit me, they couldn't access those funds while I was alive. The trust had been ironclad with me, as the primary beneficiary upon turning 35 or in the event of my grandmother's death. I had just turned 35 2 months ago. "I think I need a lawyer," I said quietly. "Funny," Jordan replied with a small smile. "I happen to know a pretty good one. They declared you dead." Taylor's normally composed face showed genuine shock as she reviewed the death certificate. "I've seen some family disputes get ugly, but this is next level." We sat in her office, after hours, the city lights twinkling outside her window, as I finally revealed my complete story. The disowning, the false embezzlement, charges, the systematic dismantling of my identity, and now the ultimate erasure of my existence. "So let me make sure I understand," Taylor said, making notes. "Your grandmother left you as primary beneficiary of both her personal trust and controlling interest in the family business. Your father, possibly facing financial difficulties from poor management decisions, orchestrated your removal from the company and family, using falsified embezzlement evidence. And now, conveniently after you turned 35, you're officially dead. So the contingent beneficiaries, presumably your father and sister, can access the trust funds." "That's the short version," I confirmed. "Do you have any documentation? Copies of the trust? Financial records? Anything proving your claims?" I shook my head. "They took everything. Even my laptop was confiscated as company property. I was barely allowed to take clothes when they evicted me." Taylor leaned back, thinking. "This won't be easy, Dania. We're talking about fraud, identity theft, possibly criminal conspiracy committed by people with money, influence, and a 3-year head start." "I know it's a long shot," I admitted. "But that company was my grandmother's life's work. She trusted me to protect it. And there's the small matter of you being legally dead," Taylor added dryly, "which complicates your ability to assert any claims." "Can they really get away with this?" I asked, the weight of the situation crushing down again. "Not if I have anything to say about it," Taylor replied, a determined gleam in her eye. "I hate bullies, especially rich ones, who think rules don't apply to them. Let's get to work." Over the next few weeks, we developed a methodical approach to building my case. Taylor began with public records searches, creating a timeline of business transactions, property transfers, and corporate filings since my removal from the company. Jordan was enlisted to help with research, her paralegal skills proving invaluable for navigating court records and financial disclosures. The picture that emerged was troubling. Jackson Real Estate Development had sold off nearly 30% of its holdings in the past 2 years, often at below-market rates, to entities that, upon closer inspection, appeared connected to my stepmother's family. Tax filings showed suspicious write-offs and increasingly creative accounting. Most concerning the company had taken on significant debt using properties my grandmother had owned free and clear as collateral. They're stripping the assets, Taylor concluded during one of our strategy sessions. Classic case of corporate raiding. The question is, why the rush? If they're willing to commit fraud by declaring you dead, they must be desperate. The answer came from an unexpected source. One evening, as I finished my shift at the diner, a man was waiting in the parking lot beside my car. I nearly called out for help before recognizing him, Patrick Sullivan, our former head of construction management. "Dania," he said quietly, "I need to talk to you." My hand hovered over my phone, ready to dial for help. "How did you find me?" "It wasn't easy. You've covered your tracks well." He glanced around nervously. "I'm not here to cause problems. I left the company 6 months ago. Things got uncomfortable." Cautiously, I agreed to talk at a nearby coffee shop, public safe, but quiet enough for a private conversation. "Your father's running the company into the ground," Patrick said once we were seated in a corner booth. "The projects are cutting corners. Materials aren't up to code. Inspectors are being paid off. I couldn't be part of it anymore." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because your grandmother was good to me. Gave me my start when no one else would hire an ex-con trying to rebuild his life. She treated people right." He paused. "And because your father's telling everyone you're dead now, which seems like a pretty serious escalation from just firing you." Patrick provided insider information on the company's true financial state. They were on the verge of collapse. My father had mismanaged everything, chasing quick profits, with reckless developments while maintaining an extravagant lifestyle. The embezzlement he'd accused me of was actually his own doing, siphoning funds through shell companies for years. "Now he's in too deep," Patrick explained. "There are rumors of federal investigations into some of the permitting irregularities. He needs cash fast, and your grandmother's trust is the only clean money left. Why declare me dead now? Why not 3 years ago?" The trust terms, Patrick guessed. Something must have changed recently. He was right. When I'd turned 35, the trust would have converted to my full control. My father's window for accessing those funds legally, even as a contingent beneficiary, was closing. "There's something else," Patrick added hesitantly. "They're selling the company, the whole thing, to Greenpoint developers. The deal's set to close next month." The news felt like a physical blow. Greenpoint was known for acquiring family businesses, stripping their assets, and discarding the remains. Everything my grandmother had built would be dismantled for parts. Patrick became a crucial ally, providing documentation of questionable business practices and confirmation of what I'd suspected. With Taylor's guidance, we expanded our investigation, building a comprehensive case documenting years of financial impropriety. Jordan's research revealed additional players in the scheme: law firms that had processed paperwork, banks that had approved suspicious loans, even the private investigator my father had hired to track my initial movements after being disowned. Linda, my former motel manager, agreed to provide a statement about my time there, establishing a timeline that proved I was very much alive during my alleged death in Peru. As our evidence mounted, Taylor filed discreet inquiries with the State Attorney General's office regarding the suspected fraud. We were careful not to show our full hand yet, but laying groundwork for official investigation. "This is bigger than just your inheritance," Taylor explained. "We're talking about tax fraud, insurance fraud, possible wire fraud, across state lines that gets federal attention. But we need to be strategic about when and how we move." Then came the social media post that changed everything. Through a fake account Jordan had created to monitor my family's activities, we discovered an announcement from my sister Tiffany, a memorial service for me, complete with a heartfelt tribute to her beloved sister, taken too soon. The funeral was scheduled for the following week at our family's church. According to Jordan's legal research, this public ceremony would serve as the final verification of my death in probate court, allowing the trust to be fully distributed to contingent beneficiaries immediately afterward. They're rushing to finalize everything before the company's sale, Taylor realized. Once you're officially dead and buried, the trust funds will be distributed and likely moved offshore before anyone can question it. So what do we do? I asked. Taylor smiled, the expression both professional and slightly predatory. I think it's time for a resurrection. Don't you? There's something profoundly disturbing about planning to attend your own funeral. I stared at the elegant announcement on Tiffany's social media page, complete with a family photo from years earlier before everything fell apart. The caption read, "Celebrating the life of our beloved Dania, taken from us too soon. Though we lost you 3 years ago from our daily lives, your spirit remained with us. Now we lay your memory to rest properly, forever in our hearts." The calculated performance of it made me physically ill. 3 years of being disowned, erased, and now publicly mourned by the same people who had orchestrated my destruction. They're really going all out, Jordan remarked, scrolling through responses to the post. Flower arrangements, catered reception, memorial fund in your name for business education scholarships. Your dad's even giving a eulogy. Of course he is, I replied bitterly. He always did enjoy being the center of attention. The question became not whether to expose their scheme, but how to do it most effectively. Taylor, Jordan, Patrick, and I gathered in Taylor's office to strategize our approach. The funeral gives us a perfect opportunity, Taylor explained, laying out legal documents on her conference table. All the key players will be present along with witnesses from the community. We'll have court orders ready to freeze assets once the fraud is exposed. I've documented all the financial transactions showing the money trail, Patrick added. Combined with the falsified death certificate, we've got clear evidence of conspiracy. Jordan had been researching legal precedents. The trust documents give us additional leverage. With proof you're alive, their attempt to claim those assets constitutes attempted theft. The penalties are substantial. The plan took shape. I would make a dramatic entrance at a key moment in the service, confronting my family publicly with evidence of their crimes. Simultaneously, Taylor would serve them with legal papers, while Patrick provided documentation to key business associates in attendance about the company's precarious state and planned sale. The timing has to be perfect, Taylor emphasized. We need maximum impact and witnesses, but also the element of surprise. We decided I would enter after my father's eulogy, but before the formal closing of the service. Taylor would be positioned near the family with the legal documents, while Jordan and Patrick would ensure all exits were covered in case anyone tried to flee. But beyond the logistics lay the emotional preparation. This confrontation would mean facing the family that had betrayed me in front of an entire community that had been told I was both a criminal and deceased. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Taylor asked me privately after the others had left. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Your life becomes public again, with all the scrutiny that entails." "I've been a ghost for 3 years," I replied. "Living in shadows, working jobs for cash, afraid to establish any real presence in the world. I'm ready to exist again." As the funeral date approached, I found myself making a pilgrimage of sorts through my former life. I drove past our family home, the sprawling colonial, where I'd grown up now, sporting a new security gate. I walked by the headquarters of Jackson Real Estate Development, the building named for my grandmother, noting the subtle signs of neglect in the landscaping and exterior maintenance. Each landmark carried memories now tainted by betrayal. The park where my father had taught me to ride a bike, the restaurant where we'd celebrated company milestones, the church where we were now to gather for my funeral, the same church where we'd held my grandmother's service. The day before the funeral, I parked across from my sister's downtown apartment, watching from a distance as she left carrying a garment bag, likely containing her funeral outfit. Unlike my father and stepmother, whose calculated cruelty I'd come to understand, Tiffany remained an enigma. Had she been an active participant in the plot against me? Or simply a beneficiary of my removal? As if sensing my thoughts, Tiffany paused on the sidewalk, looking around as though feeling watched. For a moment, I thought I glimpsed genuine grief in her expression before she continued to her car. It was the first indication that perhaps not everyone in my family had been fully committed to my destruction. The morning of the funeral, I dressed with careful consideration in a charcoal gray suit, professional, dignified and subtly armor-like. Jordan helped me style my hair, which I'd kept short and dyed darker during my dead years. "You look like you're going to a business meeting, not your own funeral," she joked, trying to lighten the mood. "In a way I am," I replied. "The most important negotiation of my life." Taylor arrived with a portfolio containing all our documentation, trust papers, financial records, the falsified death certificate, and court orders ready to be enacted. "Everything's in place," she confirmed. "Patrick's already there, keeping an eye on arrivals. The private investigator I hired got these this morning." She handed me photos, showing my father and stepmother having an intense conversation outside our family attorney's office. "They're moving pieces into position, too." We drove separately to the church, parking strategically for a quick exit if needed. I remained in my car at a distance, watching the arriving mourners through binoculars. The turnout was impressive. Business associates, community members, even local politicians paying respects to the influential Jackson family. Just before the service was scheduled to begin, I moved closer, positioning myself near a side entrance with a clear view through the windows. The church had been decorated with elaborate flower arrangements, and a large portrait of me, one from my company headshot years earlier, sat on an easel beside a closed casket. A closed casket for someone who supposedly died in a hiking accident overseas. The absurdity might have been funny if it weren't so calculated. They needed the casket as a prop, a physical representation of my death, to make it official in everyone's minds. As the service began, I could see my father take his place at the pulpit, his expression appropriately solemn. Beside him sat Heather, elegantly dressed in black, and Tiffany, whose body language appeared genuinely tense and uncomfortable. Through the window, I watched my father begin his eulogy, his words inaudible, but his performance clear. The grieving father, commemorating a daughter gone too soon. The same daughter he had disowned with the words, "You're no longer our daughter," 3 years earlier. I moved toward the entrance, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. Through the doors, I could now hear his voice, though we were estranged in her final years. "I will always cherish the daughter who brought so much pride to our family. Before her tragic choices and her untimely passing." Taylor appeared silently beside me, nodding once. It was time. As I reached for the door handle, I caught a glimpse of my sister's face through the gap. Tiffany was crying, but there was something in her expression beyond performed grief, something that looked remarkably like genuine guilt. The heavy wooden doors of the church made barely a sound as I pushed them open, but the effect of my entrance rippled through the assembled mourners immediately. First confused glances from those in the back rows, then gasps as recognition dawned. Finally, a wave of shocked murmurs that reached the front of the church, causing my father to falter mid-sentence at the pulpit. I walked steadily down the center aisle, my footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Every face turned toward me, expressions ranging from confusion to shock, to, in the case of a few who knew the truth about my embezzlement, something approaching horror. My father's face drained of color as our eyes locked. Beside him, my stepmother Heather gripped the pew for support, her perfectly composed funeral appearance crumbling into panic. Only Tiffany's reaction surprised me, a hand flying to her mouth, tears continuing to stream down her face, but her eyes showing not just shock, but something that looked like relief. I maintained my deliberate pace, walking directly toward the front of the church, where my casket and portrait created the centerpiece of this elaborate fraud. The whispers around me grew as people realized what they were witnessing. Is that it can't be. She's supposed to be dead. I stopped directly in front of my own casket, turning to face the congregation with my back to the large portrait of myself. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present, the real Dania confronting the false narrative my family had constructed. My father recovered first, professional charm asserting itself as he attempted damage control. "Dania," he said, his voice carrying through the church's sound system. "This is unexpected. We had reports. There must have been some mistake." "No mistake, Dad," I replied, my voice steady and clear. "Just fraud. Premeditated carefully. Orchestrated fraud." The murmurs in the church grew louder. I could see Taylor positioning herself near the family pew, legal documents at the ready. Patrick stood at the side door, blocking one potential exit. Jordan had taken a position near the main entrance. "I think we should discuss this privately," my father said, gesturing toward the side chamber. "This is hardly the place." "This is exactly the place," I countered. "You made it the place when you decided to hold a funeral for your very much alive daughter. When you filed a fraudulent death certificate claiming I died in Peru. When you planned to use this ceremony to finalize your theft of my inheritance." The shocked gasps from the congregation confirmed that most attendees had no idea of the scheme they'd been invited to witness. My father's expression hardened, the mask of grieving parent giving way to cold calculation. "Dania has been struggling with mental health issues," he announced to the room. "As many of you know, she was removed from our family business 3 years ago, under difficult circumstances. This disturbing behavior is unfortunately part of a pattern." "Save it," I interrupted, opening the portfolio Taylor had prepared. "I have documented evidence of every step you've taken to erase me. The falsified embezzlement charges, the identity theft, the systematic campaign to destroy my reputation and livelihood, and now the fraudulent death certificate and this charade of a funeral, all timed perfectly to coincide with my 35th birthday and your planned sale of grandmother's company to Greenpoint developers." That revelation caused another wave of shock among the business associates present. The pending sale had apparently been kept quiet outside my father's inner circle. "You're selling Jackson Real Estate," someone called from the crowd. "Eleanor's company." My stepmother finally found her voice. "This is absurd. Frank, we should call security. The police are already on their way," Taylor announced, stepping forward, along with representatives from the state attorney general's office. "I'm Taylor Grant, Miss. Jackson's attorney and I have court orders freezing all assets of the Jackson Family Trust and business holdings, pending investigation into multiple counts of fraud." She began distributing documents to my father, stepmother, and our family attorney, who sat ashen-faced in the front row. These include injunctions against the pending sale to Greenpoint and immediate restoration of Dania Jackson's legal status. The chaos that ensued was both satisfying and painful to witness. Business associates began edging toward the exits, not wanting to be associated with what was clearly becoming a criminal matter. Family friends looked torn between decades of social connection and the undeniable evidence of wrongdoing unfolding before them. My father's carefully constructed public image was collapsing in real time. Through it all, I maintained my position by the casket, a living refutation of the lie it represented. My father made one desperate attempt to regain control. "This is a family misunderstanding that's gotten out of hand," he announced, trying to project confidence. "I'm sure we can resolve." My hand. Enough, Dad. The voice that cut him off wasn't mine, but Tiffany's. My sister had risen from her seat, still crying, but with a determined set to her shoulders I'd never seen before. "It's over. We have to stop this." She turned to me, her expression raw with emotion. "I didn't know about the death certificate or the funeral. I swear, Dania. They told me it was a memorial service to make peace with the past. I knew something wasn't right, but I never imagined they'd go this far." Our father looked at her with cold fury. "Sit down, Tiffany. You don't understand what's at stake." "I understand exactly what's at stake," she replied. "Our souls, our family, whatever's left of our integrity." She moved toward me, stopping a few feet away, uncertain of her welcome. "I should have stood up for you 3 years ago. I knew the embezzlement charges couldn't be true, but I was a coward. I'm so sorry, Dania." The sincerity in her voice reached something in me I'd thought long buried, the sister bond we'd shared before money and power corrupted our family dynamics. Before I could respond, the church doors opened again as 2 police officers entered, followed by a woman in a business suit who identified herself as an investigator from the Attorney General's office. My father, seeing the situation deteriorating beyond his control, suddenly bolted for the side exit, only to find Patrick blocking his path. In desperation, he shoved past a floral arrangement, sending it crashing to the floor as he ran toward the back of the church. The officers easily intercepted him before he reached the door. My stepmother remained frozen in place, her social standing the thing she'd valued most disintegrating before her eyes as whispers and phone cameras documented her disgrace. As the officers took statements and began the process of detaining my father, I finally turned to look at my own portrait beside the empty casket. The smiling, confident woman in the photo seemed like a stranger from another lifetime, someone who had trusted her family implicitly, who had never imagined they could betray her so completely. I reached out and turned the portrait face down. I believe I said, my voice carrying in the now quieter church, "You're trying to bury the wrong person. The only thing dead here is your integrity." The aftermath of the funeral confrontation unfolded with dizzying speed. My father and stepmother were taken into custody, charged with multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The story broke in local media immediately and reached national news outlets by evening, the tale of a daughter declared dead for financial gain proving irresistible to reporters. In the church parking lot, as police cars and news vans created a surreal backdrop, Tiffany approached me hesitantly. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Not here, obviously, but somewhere." Despite 3 years of built-up resentment, I found myself nodding. "Tomorrow, Taylor's office." The meeting with my sister revealed a more complicated picture than I'd imagined. Tiffany had been manipulated by our father just as I had been, though in different ways kept dependent through financial control, fed partial information, and isolated from the full extent of his schemes. "After they disowned you, I was told you'd stolen money," threatened Dad when confronted and left town in disgrace. She explained, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug in Taylor's conference room. "I had doubts it didn't sound like you, but Dad had these documents, witness statements, bank records." "Forgeries," Taylor interjected. "Very professional ones." "I figured that out eventually," Tiffany admitted. "About a year ago, I overheard Dad and Heather arguing about moving money through shell companies, the exact thing they'd accused you of. When I asked questions, they started limiting what I was told about the business." "But you still accepted their support," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Lived in company property, took a salary, enjoyed the lifestyle." Tiffany's face flushed with shame. "Yes, I was a coward. It was easier to accept their version of reality than confront what it would mean if they were lying." She looked up, tears brimming. "I don't expect forgiveness, Danya. But I want you to know, I never agreed to declare you dead. When they announced this memorial service, they told me it was about closure for the family. I had no idea they'd filed a death certificate or what they planned to do with your trust fund." Over the following weeks, her story checked out. Financial records showed Tiffany had been kept at arm's length from the company's actual operations, given a generous allowance, but no real authority or access to accounts. While she had benefited from my removal, she hadn't been an architect of it. The legal process moved forward with surprising momentum. My father's scheme collapsed, like a house of cards, once exposed to scrutiny. The falsified death certificate provided investigators with a clear-cut case of fraud that opened doors to examining the business's financial records, revealing years of tax evasion, misappropriation of funds, and falsified tax evasion, misappropriation of funds. Documents. My stepmother, facing substantial prison time, quickly turned on my father, providing prosecutors with detailed information in exchange for leniency. Her testimony revealed that the plot to remove me had begun even before my grandmother's death, when they realized the terms of her will would give me control of the company. "The embezzlement evidence was created months in advance," Taylor explained, as we reviewed case documents. "They were just waiting for the right moment to deploy it." The pending sale to Greenpoint developers collapsed once the company's true financial state and legal problems came to light. Several of my father's business associates faced charges of their own for participation in various aspects of the scheme. Through it all, I worked with Taylor to restore my legal identity and claim my rightful inheritance. The process was complex, but ultimately successful. The courts invalidated the death certificate, restored my status as primary beneficiary of my grandmother's trust, and recognized my rightful position as head of the company. Taking control of Jackson Real Estate Development revealed the full extent of my father's mismanagement. Nearly 40% of the company's assets had been sold off or leveraged as collateral for loans. Projects were behind schedule, contractors unpaid, and several developments faced serious code violations and potential lawsuits. "It's a mess," Patrick acknowledged as we surveyed the company books in what had once been my grandmother's office and was now mine again, but not an unfixable one. "The core business is still sound, and the Jackson name still means something in this region despite recent events. I spent 6 months stabilizing the company, paying debts, resolving legal issues, and rebuilding relationships with business partners. I rehired Patrick as construction manager, bringing his honest approach and technical expertise back to our projects. Taylor's firm became our legal counsel, her straight-talking style, a refreshing change from the previous attorneys who had enabled my father's schemes. Perhaps most surprisingly, Tiffany found a productive role in the restructured company. Her creative instincts, previously channeled into short-lived vanity projects, proved valuable in marketing and client relations when given proper structure and accountability. "I've never actually had to work before," she admitted during a late night at the office as we finalized designs for a new development, our first major project since the company's restructuring. "It's terrifying and kind of exhilarating. Our relationship remained complicated, a work in progress, requiring regular maintenance and honest communication. Trust rebuilt slowly through consistent actions rather than promises or apologies. My father's legal proceedings concluded with a 15-year prison sentence for multiple financial crimes. My stepmother received 5 years with additional probation. I attended the sentencing hearing, not for vindication, but for closure, to see justice served for my grandmother's legacy as much as for my own suffering. After the hearing, as deputies led my father away, our eyes met briefly across the courtroom. I saw no remorse there, only cold calculation, and perhaps a hint of respect that I'd outmaneuvered him. I realized then that true healing would come not from his acknowledgement, but from my own recovery and rebuilding. 1 year after the funeral confrontation, I hosted a gathering at my newly purchased home, not the family estate where I'd grown up, but a place entirely my own. Around the table sat those who had helped me reclaim my life: Taylor and Jordan, Patrick and his wife Linda, from the motel who had given me my first job back, and Tiffany, still finding her footing in our restructured relationship. "I propose a toast," Taylor announced, raising her glass. "To Eleanor Jackson, whose legacy lives on through her granddaughter, and to Dania, who proved that integrity and persistence eventually triumph over greed and deception. And to found family," I added, looking around the table at the people who had supported me when my blood relatives had failed. "To the people who see us clearly and stand with us through our darkest moments." The company continues to grow under my leadership, returning to my grandmother's principles of steady growth, quality construction, and ethical business practices. We've launched a foundation in her name, providing scholarships and apprenticeships for young people entering the construction and development fields. The most profound lesson from my journey has been about identity and self-worth. For 3 years I existed without my family name, wealth, or position, stripped down to my core self, forced to rebuild from nothing. In that process, I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed and values that transcend external validation. When my father disowned me with those devastating words, "You're no longer our daughter," he believed, he was taking everything from me. In reality, he set me on a path to discovering that my worth was never tied to the Jackson name or fortune, but to the integrity, resilience, and compassion that define who I truly am. Sometimes the greatest rebirth comes through what appears to be total destruction. Like a forest after fire, new growth emerges stronger, wiser, and more vibrant than before. My life now feels authentically mine in a way it never did when it was handed to me by birthright alone. I no longer fear losing everything because I know firsthand that everything is not contained in bank accounts, property deeds, or even family connections. It resides in our capacity to stand true to ourselves, to rebuild from ashes, and to create meaning through how we respond to life's greatest challenges. Have you ever faced a betrayal that forced you to redefine yourself? Or discovered unexpected strength when everything familiar was stripped away? Comment below to share your story of resilience and renewal. And if this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others find hope in their own moments of reinvention. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the most powerful words we can speak are those that reclaim our true selves after others have tried to erase us.